So a few weeks ago, I saw an ad for a video game, and it looked like this.
Hey guys, the massive F2P update of the F2P looter shooter masterpiece, The First Descendant, has launched spectacularly. Additionally, it has a collaboration with Nier Automata, transforming into Descendant skins with perfectly recreated visual effects and animations to fight.
Now, seeing this ad, like everyone I assume, I got super excited. This new F2P update from the F2P looter shooter The First Descendant sounded incredible, and as a huge fan of Nier Automata, I was super excited for what kind of collaboration they had cooked up here, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that this ad looked a little bit strange. There was just something wrong here, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it, so I watched it over and over and over again until I slowly began to realize, hey, I don't think that guy's real. In mid-August 2025, multiple advertisements for the game The First Descendant were put on TikTok that prominently featured AI-generated content. The most egregious example of which being one which features a heavily doctored AI remix of an existing video from streamer Daniel the Demon, making it appear that he was promoting the game or something, and it looks...
I'm going to defeat it with my new Descendant Nell. She is a telekinetic powerhouse who can mark enemies for extra damage.
Yeah. Soon after this, Daniel the Demon confirmed that he had absolutely no affiliation or contract with Nexon, the company behind The First Descendant, which already makes this such an insane thing for a company to do, but it's made even worse when you realize that, as pointed out by Reddit user I Hardly Try Hard, who put out a compilation of all of these ads, that there are nearly 9,000 real creators that are on the Nexon Creators program. Nexon was quick to address this, saying that the ads were from a TikTok creative challenge campaign, which is essentially where companies can outsource advertising directly to TikTok creators who then produce the ads as if they were official and then make money from it, which sounds like a dystopian hellscape nightmare, but we don't have time to get into all that right now. Nexon's official statement not so subtly put all of the culpability on TikTok for not having anything to protect from copyright, although it's hard to imagine that they didn't have some level of approval on their side, considering one, it was going out as official advertising for the game, and two, since the creator challenge started back in 2023, I can't find a single other case of AI ad controversy, which you'd think this sort of thing would be absolutely ripe for, especially with no regulation. So I view their official statement with some pretty heavy skepticism. Even outside of this whole AI ad situation though, The First Descendant is a game that's consistently confused the hell out of me since its release last year. Every single piece of promo I've seen for this game has been roughly 20 seconds of almost impressively generic gameplay, hidden inside of like 90 seconds of this, and this, and this, and this. But despite how vapid and substanceless the game looks, it does have a fan base. Its subreddit is pretty active, it averages about 10,000 players on Steam alone every single day, which I wouldn't say is gangbusters, but it's definitely respectable, and its initial release was actually kind of massive, all of which just adds to my morbid curiosity about this game. So to try and understand it a little bit better, I decided that for 7 days, the only game I would play is The First Descendant. I wasn't gonna play it all day or anything, I have like a job and responsibilities and whatever, but for every single amount of free time that I could spare, I was going to play The First Descendant, and see if I could spot something, anything of worth here. I wonder if I found anything. Hey, imagine if instead of stealing someone's likeness without their permission, companies actually reached out directly to creators to ethically produce promo that they could, you know, approve and research and verify before sending it out there. That'd be pretty crazy, huh? Anyways, this video is sponsored by War Thunder. War Thunder is the single most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and it's available now for free on PC, console, and mobile. War Thunder is all about authenticity and dynamic vehicle combat, which means that not only can you take control of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations and from the modern day all the way back to the 1920s, but each of those vehicles are also meticulously designed with striking detail and realistic sound effects. The game has built itself up over more than a decade as the single best option for vehicle combat enthusiasts, with a worldwide player base of over 95 million players engaging in high-intensity PvP battles. One of the coolest things about it, in my opinion, is how advanced the damage system is, with each individual component like gas tanks, weapons, and engines being individually modeled so they can realistically react to impact. Like I said, the game's free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile, and if you use the links in my description or in the pinned comment, new players and anyone returning after 6 or more months on PC and consoles will also get a massive bonus pack that comes with multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 whole days of a premium account. And it's only available for a limited time, so make sure to sign up today. And now, we gotta talk about a much worse game. The first day I sat down to start playing, one of the main things I was wondering was just how much the horny bait marketing was actually reflective of the game. Was that just like a way to rope people into playing it, or was it actually oh, okay. Now, something I didn't mention in the intro is that I actually do have a little experience with this game already. Last year when it first came out, it actually had a decent buzz around it, and I wasn't playing anything particular at the time, so I thought I might as well try it. I mean, people seemed at least a little excited by it, and I don't know if you know this, but it is F2P, so I thought, what the heck. I vaguely remember playing a tutorial in some kind of liminal space and then going out and doing a couple missions, and really just feeling like this game was a cheap version of vanilla Destiny, so I uninstalled it pretty quickly and never went back. But this sort of bit me in the ass when I came back to play it now, because I got dropped into the main hub and had no idea what anything did, how to upgrade things, whatever. And this turned out to be a bit of a persistent problem where even in the final days of this mini First Descendant marathon, I was realizing that I was absolutely not paying enough mind to certain mechanics. But I will say, as much as that falls on the weird way I decided to play this by doing the tutorial and then basically not playing it until a year and multiple seasons in, it is also the game's job to get me onboarded into the experience after spending a long time away from it. It's a live service game with constant updates. It expects you to come back after a certain amount of time. Instead, there's just zero on-ramping. I got bombarded with so many things right away that I couldn't really keep track of them. In fact, I have it written down in my notes that I apparently have a dog, and I totally didn't remember this, so I looked at the footage, and it turns out under the skins page there's an option for fellow skins, and there's a dog in there who I assume is mine, but nothing else really popped up at any point to let me know how to take him out or anything. Like, I knew this game had dogs because I had seen them around, I just didn't know that I had one yet. Or maybe I didn't and it just unlocks later, but then why is he even in the skins page at this point? The first like 45 minutes of hopping back into this game were so confusing to me that I decided that I was just gonna start over. That way I could just get the tutorial again and ease into things a little bit better. But it turns out that restarting this game is actually a massive pain in the ass. Unlike something like Destiny where you can just start up a new character and run everything back, starting this game up fresh and potentially picking a new starting Descendant required a full account refresh. Something that, according to a bunch of people on the subreddit, can potentially lock you out of the game for an entire 3 to 15 days for some reason. On top of that, doing this would delete absolutely everything you own in the game, including every single purchased item that you spent real life money on, which wasn't a problem for me obviously, but like, I don't know, that's kind of crazy, right? So that means that you're totally stuck with your first choice no matter what, and the only proper way to try out new characters after this is by grinding the ever-living shit out of missions. Something that I'll get more into later. It just seems like an incredibly strange and detrimental way to go about designing a character system, but whatever, what do I know? Since I couldn't afford to wait 15 days to reset myself because I was just so excited to get in and start playing, I decided I was just gonna thug it out and try and keep up with the game's elements as best as I could. And so off I went outside of the hub, and immediately on dropping in I began fighting a couple of enemies before I got hit with a mission complete screen, even though I had no idea I was even in a mission. And then I was off to complete some of the story stuff, which has some of the most mind-numbing gameplay I've ever experienced. Every single beat in this game goes the exact same way. You get tasked by Silver Surfer to go out and complete random field missions, which are usually 1 to 3 minutes long, and all some play on the worst kinds of shooter missions. You know, like the stuff where you have to protect something from getting destroyed, or stay inside a circle to hack something while staving people off. Because you know how the most fun thing to do in an action game is stand still. After doing 2 of these field missions, you get a proper mission, which lasts closer to 15 minutes, and each of these is basically just more of the field missions just strung together with linear traversal placed in between. Then you go to the main hub, talk to someone, they tell you to go out on the field again, rinse and repeat. This is genuinely the entire loop of this game. It is broken up by one marginally more entertaining thing, which I'll get to soon, but for the most part there are no puzzles, no cool environmental sections, nothing else of substance besides going places, shooting enemies, and moving on. It is a vastly inferior version of what Destiny was doing 10 years ago, and that game was panned for it at the time, so like, what is this? And you might be thinking, okay, yeah, that sounds basic, but it is a shared world looter shooter. Going around shooting things should be most of what it is. And that is true on some level, but what doesn't help is that the shooting sucks. Like, it's competent enough to not be embarrassing, but it's also mostly stuff that a single person could hack together in Unreal over a weekend. Weapons are all just basic archetypes, there's not a ton of personality in their looks, but more importantly, enemies are so brainless and so easy to take out that even if the shooting was genuinely incredible, it kinda wouldn't matter because what you're shooting at is basically just a walking hitbox. Early game, I was just ripping through any and everything that came in front of me with a single shot. I never had to worry about ammo, enemies never try to get out of my way or flank me, and I never had to be that particular about my movement. And actually, something that you might notice when you go through the linear missions in this game is that no enemies are just walking around patrolling areas or existing in the world, because that would require the enemy AI to have a whopping 2 states. Instead, everything you fight in this game gets dropped out of a little teleporter in small groups and then just walks directly towards you, allowing you to usually pick them off in groups with a single grenade or a couple shots from any weapon. It's truly the most low effort, bottom of the barrel stuff. And I get that it's free to play, but like, there's a lot of free-to-play games that I think have a better core game loop than the First Descendant. The one thing that sometimes adds a little bit of flavor to this game is the grapple hook, which lets you fly around these areas super quickly and feels totally serviceable on its own. Everyone loves a good grapple hook, I'm not going to complain about having one. But what I will say is that I noticed pretty quickly that most of the encounters in this game don't consider the grapple hook in their level design. I remember this being something that bothered me a lot about Halo Infinite's campaign, but compared to this, the level design of that game is like Dishonored 2. There's no actual need to use your grapple hook in combat, there's not a ton of ways to tactically reposition yourself to a better spot, and nor would you ever really need to do that since the game is, again, piss easy. You rip through enemies so fast that I honestly couldn't tell if I was fighting a new faction or if a new enemy type was being introduced most of the time, since I wound up just melting them before I even got a good look. And while there is a harder difficulty option, you need to clear areas on normal first to unlock it, so this is kind of the intended original difficulty. Anyways, after going through this repetitive process for a while and my brain kind of halfway shutting off already, I finally got to fight one of the game's main bosses, or Colossi. These fights happen in that weird liminal space again for some reason, and are still fairly uninspired for the most part, with you just chipping away at a massive health bar on a giant creature, but it was at least a breath of fresh air to fight something that was actually trying to fight back. I even died once to this first guy. I mean, granted, it was just because I got knocked off the edge of the map, and I didn't have to restart or anything, but at least I wasn't sleepwalking through this part. But just as quickly as it began, it ended, and I was back to doing the same old stuff I was doing before. Now that wraps up most of my day one experience with this game, which was about 50% confusing and overwhelming, and 50% incredibly boring. But there's one more thing I want to mention before we move on, and that's the cosmetics, because oh my god. Exiting a menu or hopping back into the main hub is a genuinely laughable experience because you're just constantly being jump scared by bare ass. Everything I'm showing you right now is from the first day, maybe like 2.5 hours worth of playtime, and I didn't even capture it all. It is not an exaggeration to say that probably 90% of skins you see in the main hub are at best incredibly suggestive, and at worst, basically nude mods. And I want to make it clear, I'm not saying you can't have skins like this, or that a game is bad just because it has an overabundance of them. I mean, I like Marvel Rivals, and look at some of the skins that game has. But it's pretty clear from the First Descendant's marketing, its roster, and its in-game promo that being a video game is kind of a secondary task here. And while I don't want to cast judgment on its player base, because I know that there are some dedicated players that have been vocally against the direction the company has gone with respect to skins, and also the AI advertising, the fact that this is basically all I see when I log into the game tells a very particular story. Anyways, those are my thoughts on video game ass. My younger brother watches these videos. He's gonna be so disappointed in me. Day 2, I wake up, I'm excited, all right? I get to skip all of the onboarding stuff and jump right into Hey, did I mention, by the way, that my character's name is Lepic? When I first opened it up the day before, I thought I made the name myself because I thought it said Le-Epic, and I was like, okay, that's kind of cringe on main, but whatever. But no, that's the actual name of the character. His name is Lepic. Anyways, I hop back into the game, and I noticed that there's a new tutorial quest for me to complete, which I was kind of hoping I was done with the tutorial stuff, but whatever, maybe I'll get a nice reward for it or something. The quest was kind of weird, though. It was to enhance and equip a few particular modules, which are like minor upgrades to your character and weapons. Stuff like better health regen, ice shots, stuff like that. But instead of being told to enhance and equip any module, or maybe one particular module that they allowed you to enhance for free, you had to upgrade and equip equip 4 very specific, seemingly random modules, and each of these had a cost that was kind of high for the point in the game I was in. Luckily, I was able to just barely afford all 4 enhancements and equip them all, to which the game says, nice job. For the next part of the quest, enhance them again. The game is typically very obvious in the ways that it forces you to grind and grind to get the best weapons or descendants or skins, but in some cases it does it in such strange and unnecessary ways that I almost have to applaud it. The fact that there are some missions, even if they're not technically main missions, whose whole purpose is to suck your currency dry on things that you might not even want, is so predatory that I wouldn't be surprised if NBA 2K started taking notes. Anyways, it's probably Jesus Christ. Probably time to head out onto the field. Now, a lot of this day, and I'll be honest, every day after this point isn't gonna have as much to cover as day 1 did, since most of what you do is just rehashed over and over, and there's really nothing all that new to say about it. But I still managed to learn and experience a couple new things about the game every time I picked it up, and most of them were not great things. For example, day 2 is where I learned how beam rifles worked. See, when I first started using the beam rifles, I assumed this bar on the right side was just an overheat, because, you know, that's how these kind of guns usually work. But hitting the top didn't really do anything, and I still had a limited ammo pool that I had to reload like any other weapon, so I kinda didn't get what this was all for. As it turns out, these bars on the side are actually supposed to indicate how much charge you've built up, and the gun gets a damage multiplier every time you hit the next level, which maybe sounds interesting in theory, but there's a couple of things to note here. One, early game is a little bit wonky because the charge builds up really fast, but your ammo also runs out very fast, so it's kinda hard to notice the effects of this mechanic. Two, unlike the more typical overheat system, this take on beam rifles not only makes them less unique compared to other weapons, but also encourages you to stand still and hold trigger, while overheat discourages you from that, leading to a better combat flow. 3, the damage multipliers are apparently not very good and not worth how long it takes to charge up. 4, the range on these weapons is like 10 feet long even though you're shooting a literal laser beam. And 5, all of this effectively makes the beam rifle a very slightly altered version of an assault rifle, which is especially boring considering that half the weapon types in this game act extremely similar to assault rifles. So yeah, it became pretty clear that any sane person would avoid these guns like the plague, so naturally I used the exact same one for 5 days straight. I also noticed that you can just complete the same field mission multiple times to complete the field mission requirement, because the devs don't actually care about these missions and their quality, they're just ways to pad the time in between all of the other content that basically feels the exact same anyways. And another fun discovery was that sometimes the game puts mission markers and fast travel so close together that it's next to impossible to actually fast travel to that spot. Sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't latch onto the right thing. It might legitimately be the hardest part of this game. The only other major event from day 2 was that I got to fight a regular mission boss, like not a colossi or anything, just some dude at the end of a mission. And to no one's surprise, he's a total waste of space. He looks like a basic enemy, he literally just floats around for you to rip into, and then when you knock off one of his health bars, he gets a shield, you have to break the shield, and then do it again 2 more times. Oh boy, I sure hope not literally every single boss in the entire game is like this. Day 3 was unsurprisingly more of the same. It was just go out on the field, complete missions as fast as possible, go do the proper missions, and then repeat ad nauseum. Something I haven't had a chance to mention yet, though, is that the game does have a story, with cutscenes often playing at the end of main missions, but to call the plot catastrophically generic is probably doing it too many favors. It's your standard, you're an advanced class of warriors here to save the world from aliens fare. One of the villains straight up looks like Dr. Nefarious, and most of the plot points center around putting out random fires or grabbing new MacGuffins. At points, the game will try and convince you that it has some sort of deep lore, and people have looked into the details explaining how this world and tech came to be, but honestly, when you get past the surface, you just kind of see more surface. There's literally nothing impressive about any of its narrative elements, whether it's lore, presentation, dialogue, art design, or, God forbid, the voice acting. Now, this is a Korean game with English translation, so I do think it gets a little bit of slack for this, but I can't remember the last time I saw a set of characters so incredibly lifeless from dialogue to demeanor. I mean, the most standout character is probably Jeremy. And I'm sorry, if the most interesting person in your sci-fi adventure game is named Jeremy, something has gone horribly wrong. I also use interesting as a very loose term here. He's interesting relative to everybody else in this game, but that's because everybody else has literally no personality. Jeremy, on the other hand, kind of has one, but also the delivery of that personality is so half-assed, it's comical. Because he's supposed to be like the rebellious, spunky loudmouth of the group, but he delivers every line so unconfidently that it just sounds like he's pouting more than anything.
I'm going to do things my way. Don't even think about tagging along. If I knew you'd be seeing that, I would have stuck with the operation instead of dropping out. And I wouldn't have been slapped by Alpha. How dare you question my attitude? God, I don't know why Alpha looks out for you guys so much.
Gonna cry?
At their worst, characters are so bland that you forget about them while they're actively talking to you, and at their best, they're like an echo of an echo of an echo of an already stale character archetype. And I think even more than the gameplay being mediocre, this is the game's biggest detriment considering what it wants to be. Effective lore, interesting world building, and ideally nice art and presentation are huge reasons why these other co-op PvE shooters maintain such strong, dedicated player bases. This is particularly true for Destiny, it's true for Helldivers, even though that's kind of a slightly different style of game. From my understanding, it's true for Warframe, which I've never played personally, but it's clearly this game's biggest inspiration. And even if you take a game series that doesn't have MMO elements like Borderlands, you'll see that even ostensibly gameplay-focused titles can crumble under the weight of bad writing. The First Descendant fails at creating a universe that you actually want to continue living in, and instead its long-term interest is built on a horny house of cards, so it's not surprising that it's leaning more and more into desperate attempts to try and lure people in, something that you constantly get reminded of the second any cutscene ends. Also, at this point in the experience, I was picking up on a lot more of the predatory practices in the game's monetization. Obviously, The First Descendant isn't the first game to do something like this, and there are definitely worse offenders out there, but I do think it's worth bringing up. Many cosmetics, as well as massive time savers, or even some useful upgrades are only obtainable using the Caliber currency, which you can only get if you pay real money for them. On top of that, there's a ton of stuff in place that forces the player to have to go through multiple rounds of grinding just to get like a cool new weapon. You usually need to go out, do multiple specific missions with iffy drop rates just to get the parts to get a new weapon or Descendant. Then you gotta get all the other parts, and then you have to grind to improve these things. And in the Descendant's case, if you're a really dedicated player set on earning all of these characters, you eventually hit a cap on the amount of free Descendant slots you have, and being able to hold on to your full roster past this point also requires you to pay real money. I've seen some people play devil's advocate by saying that if you're spending enough time in the game to need some of this stuff, you might as well pay a little money in a free-to-play game, to which I say, that's stupid, and also this system is screwing over the most dedicated player base of the game, which seems pretty backwards. I will give credit to this game that it is typically a bit more upfront with some of this stuff than other games have been in the past, and I guess all you like RuneScape nerds probably don't think that the grind here is that rough, but the game does feature just a lot of things I personally really dislike, despite not being 100% against microtransactions if they're applied in the right way. Like, you can monetize free-to-play stuff, that's totally fine, just don't make it this much of a pain in the ass to play it for free. Back on the gameplay side of things, not much more went on. I fought my second Colossi, this time as a public match, and it went like this.
What? Huh? What?
Because I wasn't really all that interested in doing side activities or grinding or anything like that, and was just kind of shooting through the story of the game, it did start to get a little bit harder. Not like anything more interesting or complex, mind you, but the amount of damage my weapons were doing just felt a little bit more reasonable, and I actually decided that I was going to rock with super outdated builds for a while, because not being super overpowered was actually making the game just the slightest bit more fun. MH Swooser moment. So I noticed every once in a while when I was scrolling through a menu, this icon would appear and I would just ignore it. But one time I clicked it assuming it would like show me an in-game guide or something, but instead it literally opens up a browser overlay on PlayStation and shows you a blog post explaining what's in this menu screen written entirely in Korean. Anyways, day 4 I thought I might actually try doing some side quests. I wasn't really that interested in the rewards or anything, because again, I was pretty set on just putting myself at a disadvantage here, but I realized that 1, I should at least be engaging with that part of the game, and 2, I wasn't even getting that many weapons to switch to even if I wanted, so just for posterity I thought, whatever, I'll give it a shot. It turns out most of the side content feels identical to the field and normal missions, which I guess I don't know what else I was expecting there. Some of it is meant to set up getting different descendants. You can learn some backstory on them, I guess, if you care. But your actual actions are always just the exact same as they always have been. The only mission format that I stumbled on that was even slightly different was Special Operations. And each of these are essentially 10 rounds of fighting enemy waves with the ability to leave after each round to get a certain amount of cumulative rewards. Each wave increasing in difficulty and therefore pressuring you more and more to hit the eject button at the end of every round. And this is actually kind of an interesting reward setup, and it was the first time in days I thought maybe I'd see something new for a second, but I got my hopes up for nothing. Because while the structure of the rewards and the ramping difficulty here is a little bit different than normal, what you're actually doing is exceedingly familiar. You go to a spot, the same enemies you've been fighting all game show up in the same wave-based manner they always do. You clear them out, go to the next wave, and that's it. On top of that, absolutely zero thought has been given to the difficulty curve of these waves, meaning that for 5 straight waves, I was just breezing through absolutely everything, just like I had been with the entire game, even with outdated weaponry. And then wave 6 just hits you like a ton of bricks and becomes absolutely impossible. I would just start taking damage incredibly fast and had to run away and recover my shield because it was getting one-tapped. It was just a total overcorrection that had me desperately trying to survive, eventually failing, and logging over an hour into the mission overall. And this is kind of the part of the game where my frustration started bubbling to the surface. It wasn't even that I lost rewards here, because I'm pretty sure I still just got the stuff from the previous rounds anyways, and also, again, I didn't care all that much about the rewards. It was just being stuck in that last wave for maybe half an hour, after an initial half hour of just some of the most brainless shooter action I've ever experienced, after who knows how many hours of doing the exact same thing in countless other dry, lifeless locations, wasting away days in this black hole of a video game, I was just getting tired of it all. It hadn't even been that long, it was like 4 days, but working for 10 to 12 hours a day only to then be rewarded by getting to log more hours into the first Descendant was a cruel torture I don't understand why I submitted myself to. I started looking at all the other games I was excited to get back to. I still had to beat Death Stranding. I just started Cyberpunk. I had been so excited to dive into Metal Gear Solid 3 and Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. Instead, I was doing this. I started this entire stupid challenge on September 4th, 2025. That was the release date for Hollow Knight Silksong. What is wrong with me? I spent 7 years waiting for this game, only to finally have it there, in my hands, on my system. And every day I would scroll past it to open up the first Descendant. Over and over. Why did I do this? What have I become? Day 5, I had to shake things up a little bit. I had been in gaming limbo for the past 4 days and really had to knock myself out of it, so I thought it might be time to try out a new character. Now, like I said, getting new Descendants is usually a pain in the ass, because each one requires you to collect a whole bunch of different materials, which force you to do the same missions over and over, hoping to get some good RNG. But thankfully, there is one Descendant that you do get by doing just some early missions. Bunny. So to avoid any unnecessary grinding, remembering how my day 4 side quest binge had gone, I decided to give her a try and see if I enjoyed her abilities at all. The problem was, she was a much lower level than my current character, which meant that especially if I was going to be running with some trash weapons, things might get a little bit hairy for me out there. And I know I complained for a long time about the game being way too easy, but the ideal solution to that is making the enemies more engaging, not just giving me way less health because I'm at a lower level. But whatever, there wasn't anything I could do about this character's level right now, so I decided I'd just try and deal with it and headed over to Vesper. What is this, the 39 clues? Playing as Bunny was fine, I guess. Her grapple actually didn't need to be tethered to something, it could just grapple onto the air, which was pretty cool, but she only had one grapple charge at a time, which was kind of annoying. Her abilities were okay, they were more persistent, like speed buffs and electricity rings, but I did miss the simple damage done by grenades. And also, yeah, the being level 10 definitely led to more deaths just by sheer virtue of having a tiny health pool. At the end of the day though, even though this was a little bit different, it was also very much the same. It wasn't really that exciting to try out a new character because what the game was just so dull regardless. So there I was, just doing the same rigmarole for a while, but then all of a sudden, during one of the main missions, we got a shocking twist. Jeremy was evil all along. I mean, who could have seen that coming?
You can take it and buzz off.
And then eventually I just kind of got annoyed that I had to keep leveling up Bunny, especially because she wasn't much more of an interesting character, so I thought, Okay, I'll just go back to default man. That was kind of it for day 5. Jeremy's betrayal from yesterday had really shook me and my fellow descendants to the core, so we had some important discussions and realized that the best thing that I could do right now was probably go out and do some more field missions. At this point, it was becoming painfully obvious that the only thing my mediocre weapons were accomplishing was just padding out how long missions took, and I thought I might as well try and get some nicer gear before I go on my final push tomorrow. Plus, I hadn't really messed with any of the grindy aspects of this game much, which was by choice, but if I was going to talk about it in a video, it made sense to try and engage with it as much as I could. The game has a system where you can research legendary weapons by acquiring specific materials that'll help build them, so I picked a weapon I wanted and tracked down where I could get those materials. And the first one came from a specific mission down in the swamps that had a 20% drop rate, which is kind of annoying because it just means I have to keep doing the mission until I get lucky, but those odds aren't that bad. Plus, the other rewards for this mission were a couple of weapons that had a 50% drop chance each, and they were both infinitely better than the stuff that I had now, so I thought, honestly, that's good enough for me, and headed down to the swamp. Now, the mission I had to complete was going to 6 different circles and standing inside of each of them for 7 seconds to activate them while enemies chased me around, and that was it. And if going to 6 different circles to stand inside each of them for 7 seconds sounds stupid to you, it's because it is. I really wasn't kidding when I said this game's missions were the worst kind of shooter missions you could imagine. In fact, the first time I tried this mission, it was so simple that I decided the second time I was gonna go through the whole thing without firing a single shot, and I beat the whole mission without dying once, so I don't know, make it that way you will. What was a little bit weird to me though was that I actually hadn't gotten either of the gun rewards yet, even though my odds of getting at least one of those over 2 full runs was over 90%. Pretty unlikely, but also not impossible, so I decided to run the mission a few more times. But then 5 runs in, I still hadn't received any loot outside of the stuff with 100% acquire rate, and this is where I started to get very suspicious, because we're officially in the 0.1 percentile of chances here. So before I wasted any more time, I started researching, because I wasn't sure if I was confused about how weapon acquisition worked, or if these things were blueprints instead. Maybe they come in like a different part of my inventory or something. And I didn't find a single thing. Except that Nexon had previously been fined nearly $9 million in the past for outright lying about the drop rate percentages in a previous game. So now all the alarm bells are ringing, and I'm really starting to think something sneaky is going on here. And the only way to check was to keep attempting the mission to see if my luck would finally change. On the 8th attempt, I did actually receive the special material I was looking for, so that's good. And also I realized that I could fully craft a different research weapon, so I did so in hopes that it would help me get through the mission faster, only to find out that I had to wait multiple in-game hours for the research to complete and receive the gun. But don't worry, you can speed it up with real money. Then I went back to the mission and tried it again and again, and between each attempt I tried more and more desperately to find what I was missing. Because there has to be something wrong here. Either there's a massive controversy about this somewhere that I'm just not finding because these odds can't possibly be correct, or I'm being an idiot and just not understanding the mechanic. After 15 attempts at this mission, which meant we were officially in the 1 in a billion territory, I realized that no amount of Googling was gonna get me anywhere, and I just went straight to the source, the First Descendant subreddit. I asked if this was like a normal thing, or if I was looking for the weapon in the wrong place, or if I was even somehow, some way misunderstanding what acquisition chance meant, and after a few minutes, somebody finally replied, "Are you sure your inventory isn't full?" Yeah, my inventory was full. I got the weapons like 12 times, they were just sitting there in the lost and found. I want to make this perfectly clear. I'm the problem here. Like, I was an idiot. I mean, the only reason I even bring it up in this video is because I want to explain why I barely played anything on day 6, because I was just trying to figure out this whole issue. I did get a little bit suspicious because of Nexon's previous behavior, but I am definitely in the wrong here, and for the most part, at least from what I can tell, they're clean. At least in this case. However, I do think just like before, they could have done a better job communicating this to me. First of all, maybe draw my attention to this figure, like make it red or give me a pop-up saying my inventory is full. That's just like a basic UI thing. But also, maybe give me enough base inventory slots for me to actually recognize that I might be at the limit just by looking at how much I have. Because this just visually doesn't look like I have a full inventory. I was shocked that I only had this much space. You only get like 80 slots between all of your equipment items at the rank that I was at, so like 30 weapons could easily wind up filling the whole thing, which seems a little bit ridiculous. Like, you know that UI that you stole your UI from? Notice how it's super easy to tell how many things you have and how many things you can have? Honestly, this game's biggest sin is making making me defend Destiny, which is a game that I haven't played in 8 years. As much as it might seem like this is just poor visual design though, I do think it's 100% done on purpose, because as it turns out, the best way to dramatically increase your amount of inventory slots is by buying them with real money. Every single time that you level up your mastery rank, which is usually something that happens every few hours of gameplay or so, you're rewarded with 2 extra inventory slots. Meanwhile, you can buy up to 1,000 extra inventory slots. Yet another way that the game is technically playable for free, but it definitely nudges you to buy things that you should absolutely have access to already. Or maybe I'm just coping for being an idiot. It's definitely still like 70% on me, but the inventory system is designed to screw you over. The final day was anticlimactic. I got the gun that I researched the previous day. I also equipped some of the other guns that had piled up in my lost and found. I realized that I'd been playing with equipment that was like 5 to 10 times less powerful than what I could have been using. I mean, I did it on purpose, but I didn't realize the difference was going to be that high. The game's idea of remixing its formula is to give you 3 field missions to do instead of 2, and also give bosses 2 rounds of shields per health bar instead of 1. Very inspired choices. But whatever the game threw at me, I pushed forward because I just had to find out what happened with this Jeremy storyline. Oh, he blows up. Okay. I was now overpowered again and was reminded of just how much this game is somehow more brainless and boring when you play it the way that it's intended to be played. I beat another Colossi, played another few missions, and then just thought, okay, I'm done. I had hoped to finish the main story by the time that the week ended, but I didn't know how far away from that I was, and it's not like I think the rest of the game is going to be any different than the stuff I already played. At this point, I felt like I had done my time. I had given the game a solid 15 hours or so overall, and I was just ready to call it quits. After ragging on this game for honestly a lot longer than I thought I would, you might be expecting me to say something like, this game is so bad that I got it for free and still feel ripped off. But honestly, I don't really feel that way. Despite some clear frustrations at how the game handles certain things, and also just being upset that it kept me away from other games, which was a totally self-imposed issue, I don't really have that much disdain for this game. There are definitely worse games out there, more predatory games, more fundamentally broken games. In fact, I mean, I usually cover games that I like on this channel, but if you take the short list of games that I've heavily criticized on here, the First Descendant is maybe the best out of the bunch. It's not as absolutely busted as Redfall or Enchanted Portals, it's not as personally frustrating to me as a game like Gotham Knights, it's not as haunting as Wild Woody, but it is, to me, the epitome of Soulless. I think all of those games that I just mentioned, for their many, many faults, were at least trying something. They felt misguided, but not heartless. The First Descendant, though, is just not interested in doing something interesting. It's just a desperate attempt to copy the homework of much better games and then revolve its entire identity around sex appeal, even though that has nothing to do with what the game is supposedly about. And I truly just don't understand how this game is as successful as it is. And it's really not for a lack of trying. I gave it a real shot here, and I even asked the game's fans directly why they enjoyed it in what I thought was a pretty measured and fair post, because I was actually really curious to hear their response, but I just got left in mod approval hell. But whatever those reasons are, to me at least, it's pretty fitting that the most prominent news story about this game all year has been the AI ad controversy, because this game, while not being made with AI, shows a lot of signs of what I think AI games will be like in the future. Completely lacking in unique, defining features, telling a story that's been told a billion times in a million better ways, and featuring basically straight out the box enemy patterns and pathfinding. And that might be a harsh thing to say because real people did work on this game, and I don't want to disrespect that work because I know it's difficult. It's something that I kind of feel guilty about with the Enchanted Portals video. But when everything about this game feels like a vessel for convincing you to spend more money, and the actual core content feels like it comes in at a very distant second priority, you kind of bring that criticism onto yourself. So maybe we shouldn't be all that upset that this game is using fake, stolen, lifeless footage to promote its content. After all, that's probably the best way to represent everything this game stands for. I want to thank War Thunder again for sponsoring this video. You can play it right now for free on PlayStation, PC, Xbox, or mobile. I tried it. I'm so unbelievably bad at it, but it's really fun. You can check it out in the description or the pinned comment. And like I said, if you're new to the game or haven't played for the last 6 months, you can get a limited time bonus pack on PC and consoles with in-game rewards and a ton of premium vehicles. If you want to see more of me, you can check out my second channel or my podcast with fellow YouTube creator Landon Hansen. It's called Code Cleric. Go support us over there. Subscribe here, join the Discord, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.